My name is Carrie. I am a burnout. I identify myself as a burnout right out of the gate because a lot of times burnout is associated with shame, guilt, embarrassment because we can't carry the weight of whatever it is we have to carry. And then recovery, which is what we're talking about today, can sometimes come with a feeling of resentment, obligation, pressure, because we don't want to have to fit one more thing into our lives. So I'm here to say that's not my approach. I believe burnout recovery is 60 seconds at a time, in the shower, at the red light, in between Zoom meetings, walking down the hallway. This is how we come out of a state of burnout. So before I get into tools, I have to pop you back to 1991. How many of us experienced the 90s firsthand? Okay, good. For those of you who didn't, let me paint a picture. It's 1991. I'm this tall. I'm this curvy. I'm 12 years old. I didn't know where I fit. So I was one of those kids that floated. I had a lot of different friends at different groups. One of them was the metalheads. And the leader of the metalhead, she and I were friends, even though we had nothing in common. There was another girl who hated me. And she said so while I was sitting in science class, and she's like, "I hate you, Carrie Severson. I'm going to beat your ASS." So the next morning, I wake my parents up, and I'm like, "Hey, guess what? I'm not going to school. I don't want to get into a fight. I don't want to die today. Thanks. Bye." And my dad's like, "Well, in case you do, win. Here's how you fight." So in his whitey tighties, he gets out of bed and shows me how to throw a jab, a hook, and a sucker punch. And it was like a core memory I wish I did not have. And I go back into my bedroom and I'm like, "Please, God, help me. What am I going to do?" And there I see it. There's a big box of black, chunky crucifix jewelry that my great Aunt Lucy had sent me the night before. And the leader of the metalheads loved black, chunky crucifix jewelry. And this girl was the toughest kid in school. So I'm like, light bulb. I'm going to take this and bribe her with my chunky jewelry to make sure I don't get beat up. And that's how I got through 7th grade. That's how I got through 8th grade. We made a plan in installments of me bribing her with jewelry to ensure the fact that I didn't die. I vowed when I left my hometown, when I grew up, I was going to do something to change the way girls treated girls and women treated women. So that's what I did. 2011 hit. I created a nonprofit here in town called Severson Sisters. It was a bullying solutions organization. I had an after-school program running through every major school district, and it blew up overnight. Michelle Obama launched stopbullying.gov. The First Lady of Phoenix at the time launched Stop Bullying AZ. And my one little organization was catapulted to national spotlight, and I did not stop running for 7 years. I was on a national commercial running on USA Network in between Psych and Monk, in between reruns of NCIS, and I couldn't pay my bills. I had to choose between buying food for my dog or food for me. I was broke and felt broken. I take 8 weeks to go figure out my life. One morning I woke up and I heard this term loud and clear, burnout. Grabbed my phone, turned it on for the first time in a month, and typed the word burnout into a search engine, hit enter, and the term pops up, a definition: emotional, physical, mental exhaustion due to overwhelm or stress. Again, a decade ago. And I immediately feel a sense of relief because I had something, I had this word, I knew what I was. And if I knew what I was, I could figure out a way to come out of it. And that's what I did. I spent the next year of my life piecemealing recovery. COVID hit many years later, back in burnout. The World Health Organization identified burnout as an epidemic before COVID, stating it was a physical, emotional, mental exhaustion due to chronic workplace stress, that unmanaged chronic stress. So the big words for WHO back in 2019 was unmanaged, chronic. This was before our work-life balance became unbalanced and before our personal and professional lives became blurred. I don't know what your COVID story was, but mine was, I went from being an entrepreneur, single, planning her wedding that was supposed to happen 32 days after the initial shutdown, to replanning my wedding 5 times, And my living room was a makeshift preschool. In between Zoom meetings, I was moving a red light, green light guy and teaching my husband's toddler how to read. It was not the Zoom meetings that caused me stress. It was the work, it was the makeshift preschool. So I take this definition with a grain of salt because I don't believe burnout is specific to workplace. These definitions, though, definitely we're depleted of exhaustion. No coffee or Diet Coke in the world is enough to support us. We're in a state of apathy. We really don't care anymore. We're going through the motions, showing up when we can, but we're okay if we don't in terms of our employment. We're even cynical and a little snappy. And unfortunately, the productivity that we have is not what it used to be. Those are the characteristics of burnout. Whether you're a manager or you're an employee, this shows up pretty much the same. I knew that. I knew it in COVID. My husband and I got married on Zoom. We're those people that had to mute people coming onto Zoom and, an ordained minister out in the middle of nowhere. We buy a house in 2023 out here in Peoria. We moved from Scottsdale. And 6 weeks later, he wakes up with this lump protruding from his neck. Turned out to be a tumor cluster running from the bottom of his hairline down to his collarbone. We immediately start putting a plan together, and he winds up in an aggressive, really nasty, gnarly treatment plan. Nearly dies. It was awful. And I'm managing, advocating, caregiving, kicking doctors off his team, assigning new people to him, arguing with insurance. In America, there are 53 million family caregivers, and it's one of the most exhausting, demanding, humbling, heartbreaking jobs I've ever had. And I did that sucker for free. No payment whatsoever, with the exception of I saved my husband's life. My new book coming out next year is actually called I Saved You, Now Do the Dishes, Love Your Caregiver. Because the relationship you have between a loved one in the home as a caregiver, I was in a state of burnout I never experienced before because of the life or death scenario. It was legitimately life or death. But yeah, I had no choice but to keep going. Knowing I was in burnout, I had all the tools necessary to move it through. The difference between coming out of caregiving burnout and entrepreneur burnout was my mental state. I knew I was in burnout. I had to make the decision to give myself grace and find the space, but I no longer had the time, which is why I shifted from this concept of, you can unplug 8 weeks at a time, come back to your space, totally recovered, to recovery happens 60 seconds at a time, walking down the hallway, in between Zoom meetings, taking a breath while you're waiting for your coffee. This was taken in December of 2023, released in 2024. Almost 19,000 participants. 1 out of 4 experience burnout all the time. 3 out of 4 experience burnout some of the time. It's the some of the time people that I think are fascinating because we know we're in burnout. We have some tools to manage it, but we're finding a way back in it. And that's what happens. We experience it once. We don't have strong enough boundaries. We get into another unmanaged, stressful scenario, and we're back in it. It's a way of life. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's no shame involved in it. It's just finding the right things that can work for us that we keep in our back pocket to continue forward, finding our way out of it.